Hello everyone, welcome to today's live stream. I should mention this will be my last live stream for a little while. This upcoming week I will be unavailable for live streams, let's just say that. But I wanted, before I go, to make a nice cool little Lego animation. A while back I made a kind of, I don't know, a Lego donut assembly animation with geometry nodes, which was one of my first geometry nodes projects that I put on Gumroad. So I thought, you know what, let's revisit that and try to make potentially better versions. We'll see. No simulation nodes this time around. I'm taking a break from that. But yeah, I'll get started on that in just a second. I just want to test different materials for the various Lego parts. But yeah, I've always wanted to, you know, play around with Legos inside of Blender, even though this model is a lot of polygons. And I don't think these are like instances of like the same part object, so this will be quite heavy if I save it. I have not saved this yet. I didn't make this model, by the way, I should specify that. I got this off of Sketchfab. I am forgetting the creator's name at the moment, but I got it off Sketchfab. Just look up Lego Mandalorian, and then you'll find this. But yeah, just an experiment. So I think I will start out with... let's set up some geometry nodes. So the way I'm going to do this is I'm going to put everything into its own collection. The entire Lego ship with all of these objects into this collection, which I call Lego, which I have done. But then I'm going to make a geometry nodes thing to reference that collection and bring it into this scene. So it's basically taking that entire collection and making it so that it appears right here. I don't want to reset the children because that resets all of them to 0, 0, where their origins are. So let's leave it at that. Let's move this part up here. Let's label this geo nodes, just like that. And now it's time to manipulate these instances, these objects. Objects, instances, they're kind of the same thing in a way. So if I were to use the scale instances node, there we go, I can scale every single one of these objects by themselves, which means that I can, say, use an empty as kind of like the effector for all of this, which would be a very good idea. So I will do that. Let me get an empty over to here. And what I'm going to do first is store basically the proximity to this empty. So I will do that by bringing the empty into our scene right here, setting it to relative, and getting the distance, the vector math distance, from the empty's location to the position of all the instances, just like that. And then I will store this for use later, just to make it simpler, by using a store named attribute node, but making sure that this is on the instance domain. I will use a map range with the clamp off, just so that I can remap this when I want. So this is gradient, yeah, I'll just label it that, so that I can reference it down the line without any of the data changing. Say if I were to move the position or such. So now if I were to get the gradient right here, and let's use another map range just so that I can constrain it even further if I wish. Now we can see that, based on the distance that I set, I can change the scale, which is quite nice. And again, I could remap it here. That will be like the overall remap. And here will be just the basic remap. So let's do that. That'll be for the scale. But I want something else. I want these to move away from the empty, based on the location, based on how close they are. So to do that, I will use a set position node. Right here, let me move this up to here. Let's bring this over to here. So I'll move this over. This will be, let me label these. This will be scale. This will be gradient. There we go. I kind of want to put all this into, you know, the kind of group, because that just makes it feel more complete, even though it, you know, the box is a little bit large. It makes everything feel like its own node, which is nice. There we go, that's doing that. I think I'll make it so that the kind of radius is like 0.5 to 1. There we go, so now this is scaling, maybe 0.5 to 1.5. There we go. Yeah, so that feels alright. But now to make it so that these objects go away from the empty based on the gradient. So I'm going to copy the gradients. Copy. There we go. So to get an offset from the empty outwards, we just need to subtract from the position, the empty position to the instance's position. That's how we do that. And we plug this into here. So this is making it so that it works the exact opposite of what we want. So I'm going to scale this into the negative, so that will go away. But I want this so that the remap will affect it instead. So here we will do, it'll be no offset, but in the middle I want it to offset like that. So we'll do -1. Smoother step, just for that. Let me go and put this into a nice frame so that I can edit it just a little bit better. So this will be offset position. There we go. So that's pretty nice. I think this may need a few more constraints. So if we do this, we should now see that this leads to this rather satisfying animation. There we go. So it's like that. It's just do-do-do-do-do, which that looks very cool, like a force field in a way. That's that. But what if I want to, say, add in a little bit of rotation, maybe? Actually, I think before we get the rotation going, I want to add in a random offset for every single instance here. So instead of everything being extremely even, let me go and exaggerate the effects right here. Instead of everything being super even like this, everything being in order, to make them go slightly out of order, I can add, there we go, a random value. Oop, let's make this random value, third time's the charm, fourth time's the charm. There we go. I clicked on it this time. Very nice. And that means that I can offset each part kind of randomly. So some will effectively see themselves as closer to the object, and others will see themselves as farther. I'll set this back to 0.5. So that just helps make it a little bit more messy, which may be what you want. So instead of it being even, like that, it's... Let's see, not quite as prevalent. There we go. If you want a more messy look, you can do that. In this case, I don't think that's necessary. Like, you can see the messier look right there, but is that what I want? Let's keep it simple for the time being, so we don't need that. Let's see, so there's the offset position. And now I want to offset the rotation, but there's a good distinction to be made. If I were to get like the offset from the empty now, then it will be a little bit inaccurate if I do it after the position offset. So the position offset has to be done last. So let's go and move this stuff over, just like that. And now for the rotate instances, I want to try a similar thing that I did to the position offset. Let's get the empty, bring it over into here. But I want to use an align Euler to vector node, like this. Set this to the z-axis, and if we plug this into here, we should see that all of these are now facing away from this, which looks very cool. But we need to constrain this as we did the rest. Fortunately, that's, you know, pretty straightforward. Let's just copy over our gradient setup. You know, our remapped gradient setup. Let's put all of this into here. Just, Yeah, that's a good setup. I like my node trees being as clean as possible. So this will be rotation. There we go. I think that works already. So here, this is the factor, how much it'll affect everything. That seems to be right. So here we can see that rotates like that. Or we can invert the effect by flipping these two around. And then it'll make them kind of try to face away, but in the other direction, if that makes sense. So here we have a force field, essentially. And again, just to point this out, we can remap using the main gradient right here. So that means that I can make it so that the kind of inverse effect happens. The closer it is to the empty, the empty got lost. There we go. Let me make this a sphere just so that we can see everything a bit better. Here we go. It goes away, but then it gets collected, just like that. So if you ever wanted to make a classic Lego assembly looking effect, kind of like, oh, does anyone remember Lego Universe from like 10 years ago, or maybe even more? That was an interesting game for the 6th month that it existed. One of the games from my childhood. But you would, in the ads, it would have like assembly animations like this, which we can finally, 10 years later, or 15 years later, I forget. No, 10 years later. We can finally make in Blender. Rather easily. Like, we're just 11 minutes through, and I was already able to make it. So, not bad. See, that's beautiful. I think that's my favorite part of it. Like, it looks like there's actual physics happening. But there isn't. So, yay, no simulation nodes. Nice. I do wish that all of the objects were labeled so that I could make them all instances of each other just to really lighten up the data streams. Which actually, let me check on that real quick. Are all these sharing the same data? They are not. Yikes. What if there was a way to make it so that they all use the first in the data stream? I need to find a way to select all of them with the same one, then link object data. Then that means that they all just use the same thing like that. Let's see. A little overshoot or bounce in the motion? Yeah, that should be possible. Let me try that. So let me hide the original collection. Let me show this one, which actually lags a little bit when I reveal it. I think it must be just the shaders loading up. So a little bit of bounce back. For that, I'll need to use a float curve. This will be interesting. So let me go and break this out of the frame so that we can go and have some fun with this. So like that. So for the bounce back, since the float curve is constrained between 0 and 1, I'll make it so that it goes from 0, 1 to 0.5, and then I'll multiply it by 2 so that, you know, it'll be kind of remapped to the other. So, wait, bounce back. Oh, wait, no, we don't need that for the time being. We want bounce back. So, I'll hit the end point right here, and then it'll bounce back a little bit. So, let me go and do something like that. Let's see, so... yeah, it does kind of work, but it looks like I'll need to move this over. I'm looking forward to when, if Geometry Nodes adds in like little easing nodes. I know one was proposed in the devlogs, but I'm not sure if that actually went anywhere. It would be like the animation stuff, like ease in, ease out, elastic, bounce, all of those, which would be extremely useful. A nice little, you know, UI thing. But here you could put that in, but it's, with the way this works, time isn't exactly linear. Because it's like do-do-do. Like if you just do the motion like that, it does work, but if you go super slow, time gets slower as well. So you may not want that. ETK has those and it's nice. I would imagine. I do I do expect that we'll get those kinds of easing nodes eventually, but it seems like all the ease of use stuff will be not one of the first things to be worked on with geometry nodes. It looks like they're trying to get the basic functions down before any of the ease of use nodes. So here's another easing one, which maybe, what if I do the opposite? That it'll be flung out with a very harsh thing, but then ease like that. I think the regular one was fine for now. Do you think they want to include node groups for simulations like they did with hair nodes? Not in 3.6. I think it is planned. It's an idea floating around, I should say that. They have mentioned it, but they are not sure whether to make them custom built or node groups. I kind of want them custom built, if I'm being honest. Because that means the code will be as fast as possible, as elegant as possible. While in the hair nodes, the nodes, like, with the lack of loops, I'm not even sure it's possible to add in proper simulation, like, pre-made node groups without loops in geometry nodes at the moment. So, I don't think it's actually possible in its current time, which I'm very impressed they were able to make the hair nodes without loops. But I think that the lack of that may have contributed to, like, the lag factor with those. But we'll see. I don't know the most about, I don't know too much about the code versus node aspect, so I'll leave that up to them. I'm sure they'll make a good decision on that. Alright, so this effect is basically done. I'm arguing whether to end the stream right now because, I want this to be a nice short and sweet stream for the last stream for a while. Probably for the next week or so. We'll see. We will see. But yeah, a nice little effect. That works quite well. This is my favorite version. That it feels like a magnet almost. What do you mean custom built as opposed to the other? Like, you know how we have like the duplicate elements node I just pulled, the first one I found here. This one is hard-coded. That's nice, because we're not supposed to edit anything inside of there. With the hair groups, like these ones, you're not supposed to edit anything in there because it'll all just break everywhere. So, it's not exactly wanted. But you could go in and mess around with these, which may not be the best idea. And I would assume that the hard-coded nodes are the fastest possible version, while the hair nodes are not. Just because nodes take up more, memory, I'm assuming. I'm not entirely sure. But yeah, I'm just going to play around a little bit more with this, and if I can't figure out what else to do with this effect, then I'll just end the stream, because I like this effect. Like a force field moving around. I could make the shaders a little bit better, but at this point I don't think that's necessary. Let me add in a little sunlight just to see how that looks. I like the HDRI look, but we'll see what this looks like. So, wait, where's the... Oh, cycles, ew. That's why I couldn't find the contact shadows. Very nice, that's better. Let me set this to like 30, just to make it look a little bit more like sunlight. Even though it's completely white sunlight, which is inaccurate. So let me move it just a little bit. There we go, very nice. I'm still not sure whether the bloom in Eevee changed in 3.6. It feels better for some reason. I'm not sure. Alright. I think I'll end the stream now. Thank you all for watching. And yeah, I'll answer the last couple of questions here before I go. Let me just take a look at this. Let's see what it looks like in the irregular scene. Wow, that is... Like, look at that. That looks so good. I like how that looks. Without anything else, you know, it doesn't look bad. We need the fill light. Until we get the screen space SSGI and EV next, you know, scenes like that will just not look great. We need the bounce lighting. Hopefully we get something like Lumen in Blender in the future, but I think that is very much down the line. So it would be a very nice big feature for 4.0. I know if they've floated like ray traced reflections, but I'll have to see if that's in the 4.0 schedule. But yeah. How long have you been using Blender? A long time. I think over 7 years at this point. I started when I was just a wee lad, just wanting to make Minecraft animations. And I've been doing it on and off since, but now since this is my career, I've been doing it almost pretty much every single day. Alright, that seems to be all. Would be nice to see this in kind of a galaxy environment. Yeah, but everything in geometry nodes I had to learn within the past, I would say 2 years, because geometry nodes is only like 2 years old at this point. And simulation nodes are not even out yet, technically. They've only been, like, kind of a thing within the last 6 months. So you don't need to, you know, learn Blender for years upon years upon years to learn everything I know. The thing is, I just learn as the technology develops. So before geometry nodes came around, I could not do any of this. Most of the effects I'm making now, I could not do 2 years ago. So, even 1 year ago, I think. Sorry. But yeah. With any procedural thing, you feel like you're limited by the technology of your time. Which the big limit, which I've been talking about a little bit too much, has been loops. Proper loops in geometry nodes. Because that's like the last big thing, fundamental thing, to figure out. How did you learn all this? Mostly it's just because when geometry nodes was first being developed, I was like, oh, that will be one of the most powerful things inside of Blender. So I started learning it as they were developing it. As a new node got made, I would go and look at the changelog and see what it did, and that's how it worked. But with geometry nodes, like stuff like this is a perfect example. You go get some data, you know, you do the vector math nodes and all that. You set the data over here, and then you reference the stored data and all of that. Like the position, stored data, location in the object info node, stored data, and then we manipulate it with the distance and the map range, and then we do that. The vector math nodes are extremely useful when it comes to geometry nodes, but there are quite a few effects where you don't need, you know, like the complicated math. GeoNodes needs to work with the physics sims, really missing that. Well, currently the physics doesn't exist. There's no way of doing that. Like, there's the old simulation method, which is like the cloth sim and all of that. And then there's the simulation nodes, which will be coming out, but when that does come out, everything will be done manually. There will be no automatic stuff. You want collisions, you have to make them, which I've been trying to find out a good way of making it for quite a while. There's still no good way, partly, I believe, because of the loops problem once again, but we'll see. Alright, I think that'll be all. We're almost at 25 minutes. I think I'll take, maybe 1 or 2 more questions before I go, because this is just fun to play around with. Quite fun. Like, if I were to make a simulation nodes version of this, it would be, as soon as the empty gets here, the parts fly away. Then the ones closest to them also kind of get affected by it. Which, for that, we would need the index of nearest node, because that's the closest thing we have to proper loops. Why shouldn't it work with soft and rigid body sims? Because those are very interesting things. Okay, so let me explain a little bit. With the cloth sims and all that, they're treated inside of their own zone. So if you have some geometry, say a cube, once you make all your edits and stuff, even with geometry nodes, as soon as the cloth sim starts, this is frozen. The topology cannot change. It cannot move or anything like that. Well, it could move, but the topology cannot change. So if you have geometry nodes running on it, it would mess everything up. That's why if you change the topology in the middle of a cache with like the cloth sims, everything just spaghettifies. So with the cloth sims and all that, those are all self-contained. So with the geometry nodes, they shouldn't interact because it would mess everything up. Like the thing is with, you know, with all the modifiers, those should happen first and then the cloth sim happens second. With simulation nodes, it's trying to kind of merge the kind of physics-based dynamic effects with geometry nodes that we have, but the kind of make your geometry edits first and then do the simulation, that's still a problem. Like that, it's still a problem that geometry nodes and simulation nodes are trying to fix, but it's still very complicated. It's just a difficult concept to go around. But yeah, hopefully with simulation nodes, the big leg up is that you can do it with any geometry you input into it. So I would be able to like make these instances wobble around properly and then stuff like that. Or if I want to curve to go and have physics, I can do that, which you currently can't do with the simulation stuff. They cannot make that work in the future. What's the difference to... What's the difference to Vellum to Blender Sims? Vellum? I don't know too much about that. That's a Houdini simulation thing. But possibly in the future, they may be something like Vellum in Blender, but that's very far down the line. But things like... Like, it would be nice... How do I best explain this? Like, if you have, say, a cloth simulation here, it would be nice if you could have geometry nodes edit, like, the vertex mass, or the air viscosity, or the tension, and all of that dynamically. But... that's very, like... in its current state, since this is self-contained, that won't happen. Like, how would you add in, like, an attribute to here? It may be possible. Kind of like how you can do that in the geometry nodes modifier, but I don't foresee that happening in a long time. But with simulation nodes, once they like if they're able to make like all this that I'm talking about, expect this like a year down the line, a year from now or further. Like don't expect cloth simulations or rope simulations inside of geometry nodes natively for a long time. It will take a long time to implement those. But people, maybe even myself, might be able to make those before then, just because our versions will be fast, quick, not physically accurate, and all of that. But with those versions, they will be like custom node groups, and you would be able to edit quite a bit of that with like, you know, the attributes you set in geometry nodes, but the topology, if it changes, will be severely messed up. So maybe in the future, but it'll come from, it won't be supported by Blender natively for a long time. Blender 4.0 will make, with loops, because that is planned currently, will make a lot of like cloth simulation, possibly fluid simulation, possibly smoke simulation. I shouldn't go that far. Possibly smoke simulation, but all that will be kind of possible in the future, but the integration will be difficult, so we'll see. Where would you recommend looking to learn about different nodes? I think Arendelle has a lot of good tutorials about that. I believe so. Or you can look at like the Blender documentation on that. That's where I kind of look in case I don't know what they're currently like if there's a node like, oh, the align all alerts vector node, how does this work? I would look it up in the Blender documentation and it would say, oh, this is that input, this is that input, that's that input. There, that's what the output does, and that's how the node acts. That's how I kind of learned how like the topology nodes, the mesh topology nodes worked, even though they're still really confusing. So those, the topology nodes, those are still very confusing. Don't try to learn those just yet. You only need those for the most advanced kind of techniques. But yeah. Geometry nodes, in theory, is simple. You're just getting some data like, oh, position data. And then you edit it with like this, and then you can set it as something else. But yeah, store named attribute is going to be your best friend, because that stores the data on the geometry, which means that it can't really... which means it can be referenced anywhere in the node tree without any real huge issues. And then you can edit it again with like making another store named attribute and all that. But store named attribute will be very useful, so I recommend looking into that. And it keeps your node trees clean, because that doesn't mean you need spaghetti going everywhere. Which if we look in the hair nodes, they don't use named attributes. And, well, actually, that was a pretty... oh, yeah. And that makes the node trees more confusing, unfortunately, even though I believe it's necessary for speed. Let's get one, yeah, duplicate hair curves. Yeah, let's look in this. A little bit more complicated. But that's all very advanced stuff, which I think is more complicated because they don't have loops. But we'll see in the future if that changes. Let's see. Oh man, that's a real bummer. I was really hoping for that to come soon. I feel we're missing so many great options without the physics. Kind of, yeah. Like, Houdini, Blender's not going to become Houdini for quite a while. At least, natively. Like, geometry nodes feels like, oh, the most advanced users in Blender can finally make tools they've always wanted to make, like, procedural effects and stuff like that. But for the average user, stuff with, like, physics with simulation nodes, which is still not out yet, that's coming in 3.6, that won't be available for users to just play around with for a long time. But until then, just use the regular, you know, collision, cloth, rigid body, all those, just use those. They're the easiest for the time being. Yeah. I do have, here, let me read the comment. I don't understand attributes, but I've been slowly learning about them watching your content. I have a tutorial about that, about the store named attribute node, and also the geometry nodes in a nutshell video. Both, that talks about like, oh, getting data, manipulating data, setting data, the kind of go-to logic behind geometry nodes. But if you look on my channel, there's a video about the store named attribute, and you'll see what it does there. Yeah, you saw the nutshell one. Yeah, that one's useful, but if you want a little more in-depth look at the store named attribute node, that's good. Because the thing is, in geometry nodes, everything that's stored is just a vertex color, essentially, or like a UV map or something like that. But I would highly recommend that. That'll tell you pretty much all of its uses. But yeah, I'll stop the stream now. I've been delaying for too long. Thank you all for watching. Hopefully your geometry nodes journeys go well. Don't stress about it if you get overwhelmed. Geometry nodes is very math heavy when you try to do advanced effects. But yeah, thank you all for watching, and I will see you next time. In probably more than a week, just to let you know. Alright, bye-bye.